My name's Maxim Furek. My book is Region Hoodoo, Paranormal Tales from Inside the Pit, and that could be purchased from my website, if the folks wanted an autographed copy. That's www.maximfurek.com, or you could purchase it from Amazon. I think I've been writing since I was like 5, but I used to draw comic books, and I used to draw comic books about my brother John. I call him John Junk, and John Junk was the hero. So I would do these cartoons and that, and then I would write little stories. I was always into science fiction. I liked the horror. I was raised on a Thriller, Twilight Zone, all that stuff later on. But I went to see all the black and white horror movies, and I just loved that stuff and used to read about it, and then started to write, and kept a journal that, unfortunately, I lost it, but I had this, when I was a teenager, I had these journals, and sort of like Nick Adams, the Rebel. Nick Adams was a Confederate soldier. His show was on ABC TV. It was very popular. But he would write at the end of the day in his journal, these adventures that he had. And I thought, how romantic. To go and do all these adventures and then write about it, like Ernest Hemingway. And so all these people, like Nick Adams, like Ernest Hemingway, John Steinbeck was a writer that I just loved. Certainly Edgar Allan Poe and H.P. Lovecraft. So these were writers that spoke to me, and I just liked their craft, liked the way they wrote, liked their story. And so I always envisioned myself as a writer, always wanted to be a writer, always was a writer, always was into literature. And not, highbrow stuff, but science fiction and horror. Yeah, Region Hoodoo. What I do is, Robert, I try to take a look at the paranormal and spiritual aspects of the region and bring them a little bit closer to the supernatural. So what we're trying to do is we're trying to make sense of some of these anomalies out there that we don't understand and haven't been able to give a definition to. So that's what I'm trying to do. But the book's about paranormal and spiritual aspects, and there's some interesting things, but they're all related to the coal region, and they're all Pennsylvania centric. I'll tell you what really got me into the paranormal. It sort of found me, and I wasn't looking for it. I was writing my rock biography. I was writing somebody else's dream, and basically I was trying to connect the 1971 song Timothy, which was about cannibalism in a mine. I wanted to connect that with the real life Shepton mine disaster of 1963, where 3 miners were trapped for 2.5 weeks and only 2 came out. And when they came out, the townspeople wanted to know what happened to your buddy, what happened to the 3rd miner. And there were immediately allegations, unfounded allegations of cannibalism. So Timothy, the song, seemed to parallel what happened at the Shepton mine disaster. After investigating Shepton, I realized that there were a lot of really weird things that happened there other than, suspected cannibalism. So that got me into that genre. Well, one thing I try to do with Region Hoodoo is I firmly believe that art imitates life. And if you take a look at my book, the first chapter is called Night of the Living Dead. And there were 3 major motion pictures. They were from Pennsylvania: Night of the Living Dead, The Blob, and The Philadelphia Experiment. And they're all in my book, but they played a key role in sort of defining Pennsylvania as a state of weird anomalies. Night of the Living Dead came out in 1968, and most people think it's about zombies, and most people think that Night of the Living Dead begat The Walking Dead and all this. It was sort of like a classic. And but I contend in the book that Night of the Living Dead, ostensibly it was about zombies, but it was also a sociological look at the turmoil that America was undergoing in 1968. And what I'm talking about is, in 1968, North Korea seized the American warship, the Pueblo. There was the Tet Offensive in 1968. Every single province in South Vietnam was overrun by the Viet Cong. There was assassinations of Robert Kennedy and Martin Luther King Jr., and there were the race riots, the Easter Sunday riots, where over 100 cities in America were burned, were torched, were looted. So there was just a whole lot of just craziness that happened in '68. And I tell people, I think my book is almost like a cautionary tale. I mean, don't tell me about how bad things were during the pandemic, during 2020 and 2021, and even today. Don't tell me how bad it is with post-COVID and the political divide and all that. It's not as bad as it was in 1968. That's when the whole fabric of our society was being ripped apart, and we endured. And that's the important lesson from that. And I think that's the thing that maybe my book shows, that maybe that optimism, things aren't as bad as maybe some people think. So the book, it's a paranormal book, but it also takes a look at some of these things through a sociological and psychological lens. And I don't know if any other paranormal books, or very many, have done what I've done. Uh, I wanted to call the Shepton book the Shepton Convergence, just because of all of those different layers of weirdness that happened. For example, in Shepton, we had examples of out of body experience, of near death experience, and afterlife experience. Plus, the rescued miners saw humanoid creatures. They saw the vision of Pope John the 23rd, who had died 2 months earlier. The Pope died in June of '63, and Shepton took place in August. So there were just a whole lot of weird things that happened in Shepton, just for beginners. So there's Shepton, there's the Curse of Centralia, a town, a ghost town, where a fire was started around 1962, '63. It's still burning today. It's the fire of hell. It's the gateway to hell. A Irish Catholic priest put a curse on Centralia. And so say what you will, but I mean, it's still burning today. Centralia, Berwick, with its connections to Dr. Frederick Santee, the White Witch. Santee was recognized as one of the foremost abstract thinkers of the 20th century. And he was from Walpollepen, just 5 miles up the road from Berwick. I was his patient. I was his friend. I interviewed him. I still have the cassette recording. And I was there when he died. I was there at his funeral, and I was hanging out with his publicist, David McCullen, and talking about Dr. Santee. And David would share some of his personal anecdotes about Dr. Santee. But Dr. Santee, and then Richard Sharp Shaver from Berwick, who is still infamous in the chronicles of ufology. I mean, people still talk about Richard Shaver, who claimed that he had been held captive by the Diros. He was held captive in subterranean underground caves. And he wrote it with Palmer, with Ray Palmer, in Amazing Stories. They had the Shaver mystery. This was back in the '40s. People believed Richard Sharp Shaver from Berwick. They believed him when he said that he was held captive by these evil robots. So he was infamous. The other thing too about Richard Sharp Shaver, the FBI investigated him. They believed that he was the one that he kickstarted this UFO hysteria. Richard Sharp Shaver from Berwick. So he was was being investigated by the FBI for that. But yeah, Dr. Frederick Santee has a chapter in my book, and he is almost a legendary individual. He was a doctor. His father was a doctor, and his grandfather was a doctor. They came from Baltimore. They settled in Walpollepen. And I was his patient, and then I became his friend, and I went up there and I interviewed him numerous times, Dr. Santee, and also Jane, who was the high priestess of the coven. They were Wicca practitioners. They believed that God exists in everything, the trees, the stars, the rocks, everything. And the coven was initiated by Sybil Leek, known as the world's most famous witch. She was from England, and she came over there. Dr. Santee associated with a lot of impressive people. Sybil Leek was one. Bertram Russell, the mathematician and philosopher, was the other one. Bertram Russell wanted Santee to go over there to England and teach in Bertrand Russell's experimental school. But Santee refused and Russell promised to teach Santee all the mathematics that he could remember. He would teach him that. But Dr. Santee didn't want it because he didn't like the way the school was organized. He didn't think that it was well disciplined. But Santee and his father treated the local people, really well. They would either treat them for free or maybe charge a quarter, for a visit. He made a lot of his own concoctions. He was an herbologist. Wonderful guy. Just a charitable person. I think he really liked me. He gave me a copy of his book, The Devil's Wager, and he wrote something like, "Dear Max, thank you for a deep and penetrating interview." And but he was just a great person. And in the interview, when I played it back, this was years later, I played back the cassette recording, and Dr. Santee spoke in two different voices. Like right now, his normal speaking voice, and then every now and then, it sounded on the tape recording that there was another person being interviewed. And here, what he did was he would go and somehow put his tongue to the roof of his mouth and speak like this, like it was another person. So, I mean, not as forced like that, but he was able to articulate like that. And again, I don't know what that was, but I was playing that cassette for a fellow paranormal researcher, and we were wondering who's that other person that I'm interviewing, and here was Dr. Santee. Yeah, I have a couple of chapters on Bigfoot in Region Hoodoo. One's the Bigfoot Enigma, trying to figure out what it is, and then the Bigfoot Hypotheses, and I talk about all these possible things that it might be. Because, there's a lot of us that are looking for the flesh and blood. We want to see the answer. We want to see the DNA, the hair, the bones, and all that, Pennsylvania, again, we don't have one central data bank that collects all this data, so we don't know. But most researchers believe that Pennsylvania ranks number 3 as far as Bigfoot sightings after California and Washington State. I've been fascinated by Bigfoot. I attended the Bigfoot Ocala Expo this year down in Ocala, Florida. They had 4 guest speakers. They had about 4,000 people. And while I was there, I was interviewed by a podcaster from Tallahassee, and we talked about Region Hoodoo and my chapters on Bigfoot. So the predominance of these sightings seems to be in western Pennsylvania in a place called Chestnut Ridge. And it's a 4 or 5 county area that's southeast of Pittsburgh. It's about a 100-mile stretch that goes from Pittsburgh down to West Virginia. It's desolate. It's at the foot of I believe it's the Allegheny Mountains. And again, that's where we're seeing Bigfoot sightings, but also we're seeing Bigfoot sightings along with UFO sightings, which sort of makes a lot of us believe that maybe there's an element of the paranormal associated with Bigfoot. So, in my book, I talk about the various hypotheses. If it's not a flesh and blood creature, then what is it? Well, we have a couple of theories. One comes from Carl Jung, who said that maybe we somehow project, these images, because of social turmoil. Maybe we project these images like flying saucers, maybe like Bigfoot. And then the other one is Albert Einstein's theory of the wormhole theory, that there may be wormholes or bridges that connect space-time continuums together. So it's possible that these Bigfoot creatures are shape-shifting between parallel universes or parallel dimensions. And that's why we see them, and then with bilocation we don't. Or we see them in front of us, or then they're behind us. So I don't know, but all I know is there's a whole lot of people seeing the same thing, reporting the same thing, that they see creatures that are 6, 8, 10 feet tall, shaggy creatures whose eyes don't reflect light, but they emit light, and they don't walk, they glide, and they bilocate, and that is you see them in front of you, and then all of a sudden they're behind you. So, a lot of people seeing the same thing. A lot of people around the world. So a lot of my stories, I think, are relatively personal. Like I knew Dr. Santee, and also I lived a couple of doors away from Catherine Adamczyk. That was Nick Adams' mom. That was on Second Avenue in Berwick. She went to the same church that I did, St. Cyril and Methodius, Greek Catholic Ukrainian church. But Nick Adams was one of the cast in Rebel Without a Cause. And there have been numerous Hollywood writers, Hollywood reporters that claim this film was cursed. Because when you take a look at some of the people there that died mysterious deaths, James Dean in his Porsche, Sal Mineo, a homicide, uh, 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 Nick Adams, formaldehyde intoxication, formaldehyde poisoning, and then Natalie Wood, another Ukrainian, as was Nick Adams, who died and on a mysterious boating accident off of Catalina Island with Christopher Walken and her husband, and also Natalie's husband, Richard Wagner. So we don't know exactly what happened. Uh, Many people think there was foul play. Richard Wagner won't talk about it any longer. Uh, Evidently, well, so we don't know. But anyway, those were the folks that were involved in Rebel Without a Cause, and Nick Adams was one of them. Just a lot of stuff happened. Uh, his death was still deemed a mysterious death, and Nick's daughter Allison believes that her father may have been murdered by his attorney. So that's what she contends. Oh yeah, has been my best book. It's only been out for a little over 4 months. It's published by Beyond the Fray. They're a paranormal publishing house from San Diego, and all they do is publish paranormal that genre. But we've done really well. We're zigzagging in and out of the top 100. We were as high as number 14 on Amazon's top 100 in paranormal sciences, and it's being read. It's being well received. We have, I think it's 30 reviews, and I don't know why, but for us readers, for us authors, it's tough to get those Amazon reviews. I don't know why, but I have 30 of them, and I'm just proud of that. So, but I think people like the paranormal. People are just questioning. They're searching for answers, and my book is sort of like a comprehensive study of the paranormal and spiritual aspects. So, it's getting a lot of traction in a lot of different quarters. Like I said, the Wicca practitioners like the chapter by Dr. Santee, but because of the Bigfoot chapters, I've been invited to several expos, and I'm excited about that. There's going to be an expo in Elysburg on August the 12th, and I'm going to be one of the guest speakers. And then on September the 30th, I'll be out in Johnstown with Stan Gordon, and we're going to be there's going to be 4 guest speakers. But I'm looking forward to that because it'll be nice to go outside of my area and tell the people about the Coal Region Hoodoo and some of these other things. So this is going to be a great opportunity for me. But Coal Region Hoodoo is my vehicle. It's going to take me there, and I'm really proud of this book. It's a great book, and as my friend John Yammers pointed out, it has over 400 references to books, magazine articles, and personal interviews. So this, I think it's well documented and researched. I don't know how many years, but I mean, I for some reason I just can't get these projects done like in 6 months or whatever. It took me years to go and do the interviews. Like for example, I have a bunch of information there about Ed and Lorraine Warren, and they were responsible for the Conjuring franchise. Conjuring 1 and 2 and Annabelle 1 and 2 and all that. The devil made me do it. So I met Ed and Lorraine in Jim Thorpe. That was 1988, and they were on a 15-city tour promoting The Haunted. That was their book that they co-wrote about the Schmurl haunting, which is in the book. So I met them, and we became friends over the years, and I would call them up and ask them questions about demonic possession, and how Ed would go there and do do battle with these forces. So so they're in there, but a lot of the information there seems to be because I had a personal connection to Dr. Santee and Nick Adams' mother and Ed and Lorraine Warren and Fred Tracy, who had information on the Philadelphia experiment. So anyway, but this took years, and but I'm so glad that I found Beyond the Fray publishers because did a wonderful job with the book, and helping with the promotion. So it's been a nice experience, thus far. I think that the way first of all, it's comprehensive. I mean, I take a look at everything from Bigfoot to UFOs to haunted houses and demonic possession and all that. So there's just a whole lot there, from A to Z. So I'm proud of that. The other thing is that I look at it through a psychological and sociological lens. And it's not just the paranormal, but as I said earlier on in the interview, that I take a look at paranormal and spiritual aspects and try to slot them into the scientific. And I'm trying to be like J. Allen Hynek, like John Mack, like Jacques Vallée, maybe even like, I think maybe, I've been called a John Keel, but all of those researchers and authors that have made ufology and made the world of the paranormal more of a scientific thing, a scientific study than just folklore and more than just superstition. So I think that's what I do. I think I approach this as an academic, as a student of the occult. I want to learn. I want to believe. I want to see these things. I don't know if you're familiar with the Rolling Stones. They had a double album called Exile on Main Street, and Keith Richards had a song called I Just Want to See His Face. And it was about God. He said, don't tell me about the miracles and walking in water and everything else. Give me the proof. I just want to see his face. So it's a reggae song, but I think a lot of us are saying that. I just want to see the proof. Yeah, I liked Corso's book about Roswell. Philip Corso was a former major, and he had close contacts with the Air Force uh, Public Information Office. So they were feeding him information, but in his book he talked about reverse engineering and about discovering craft and everything. So that was one of the early books that really sort of fascinated me. But I like him. I read J. Allen Hynek's book, but they're sort of dry and academic. John Keel is the one to read. He shakes it up. It's really interesting stuff, whether it's the Mothman prophecy or, a lot of his other ones. I'm starting to connect these authors like Jacques Vallée. A lot of them are talking about that, that these entities, UFOs, they're not physical vehicles, but it's something else, something of the psychological, the spiritual, the mythological. We don't know, but it's something else. And so a lot of people are looking in that area. John Keel probably being one of the first ones, maybe Gray Barker, but one other thing too that just as an end note, we talk about Richard Sharpshaver being from Berwick and Dr. Santee and some of the things, the Shepton and Centralia and all that. One of the main figures in ufology, is Albert Bender. And Albert Bender was one of the first to talk about the Men in Black, these mysterious government agents, dressed in black, looking sort of Oriental, wearing the fedora hats, and warning people who've seen UFOs not to say anything. Well, Albert Bender was from Duryea, Pennsylvania, right up the road, so he's one of us. Yeah, I have people, every now and then somebody will reach out and say they want to write a book, and how do they go about it? And as you're an author, it's a maze. There's a lot of roads that go that end up at the same place. But I would say that write and also read. Read as much as you can and absorb that. and look at some of these styles and utilize some of those styles. I mean, those metaphors. I mean, Stephen King talked about fear crept out of his mouth like a black bird. That's a great metaphor. Well, use something like that. I mean, not that one, but make up your own. You know, the dog, at the attaché case lie at his feet like a sleeping dog. You know, the road stretched out before him like a sleeping snake. I mean, those metaphors, make your metaphors work, because that's an art form. Read poetry, because that's another language, and you need to go and make your prose, some of it, poetic. Do the dialogue. If you're writing fiction, make sure you work on the dialogue. Make it sparse, make it authentic. You know, I mean, that's how we usually typically speak. So do that. But read as much as you can, and then write. And every day I write something, and with me it's almost like being obsessive compulsive, because I can't just write one paragraph. I got to write another one and another one, and it's just nice to start off with something, and just start off with nothing, and then build on that. And with the computer and with your files, you can just go and look back and change and add and do all that. So I think we're fortunate in 2023 to have all this, you know, to have computers and word processors or whatever, as opposed to just typewriters, which, you know, back in the day, I remember using typewriters to write, and I was creative and I was productive as well. But I think with the computer technology, it's a lot easier, you know, to file those away and to change them and to add and to change things around. So I don't know. I kind of think it got a little bit easier with the technology in that respect. And I am concerned about the AI, because I think that there's going to be shortcuts, and there's going to be things that I don't know. I don't like what I'm hearing about AI, and it's almost as though you can have, you know, some robotic entity creating, you know, a story for you, you know. So I'm sorry that we're at that point, but I think we are. Okay, so I'm excited about, I don't know if your readers could see this. This is the Flying Saucer Esoteric, History's Most Amazing UFO Events. So it's my latest book. I mean, I've sent it in to the publisher. We're waiting to hear back. I mean, this isn't a guarantee, but I'm hoping that they publish it. But I have a real good concept for how I want the cover to be, this medieval thing with a little saucer there. And so anyway, and I know exactly how I want the colors to be and everything. So that is a book about flying saucers. It's almost like a time machine, starting with these theologians and philosophers, BC, before Christ, who believed that there was life on other planets. Some of them were viewed as heretics because they went against church and state, and like Bruno was burned at the stake for going against the church. So we have that. We have biblical scripture, and this is scripture that people like Eric von Daniken was saying, that the space brothers, the ancient aliens, visit us, and the Bible tells about that. So I have all of these pieces of scripture that, you know, that's part of that Eric von Daniken and Morris Jessup, narrative. And then I get into the 1100s, 1200s, etc. Talk about Roswell. And what's interesting about the Flying Saucer Esoteric is that most people know about the Roswell crash of 1947, or Kenneth Arnold, you know, the Mount Rainier 9 disc that he saw in 1947. So I would say start there, open up the book and look at those dates, and then see what happened before. Was there any UFO activities, anything weird before 1947? And there was. I got a whole half a book about that. And then what happened afterwards. So we end up with the July 26, 2023 congressional hearings, where the one whistleblower, the former intelligence officer, claims that that we have retrieved vessels, that we have these humanoids that we discovered, and also that in the 1930s, Italy captured a UFO and gave it to the Vatican, who in turn gave it to us. So this is what that testimony was. So let's wait and see. Let's see what's right around the corner. I mean, Grush, the whistleblower, claimed that he gave this information, this intel, to government officials. So let's see what he said. Where are those locations? And what do we know? And what did we find? And is there an actual cover up? So, you know, it's either he's telling the truth or he's not. And either the government is maintaining a cover up, or they're not. So at this point, we don't know. But there's two conflicting opinions here, and it's really kind of exciting that this is happening after all these years, happening right now. So there's more to come. So.